Chapter 18. A New Assignment. The ex-police chief, Mr. Lee Soong, chuckled. "Impatience," he said, "is like a goat butting its head aimlessly on the wall. All he does is mar the wall and wear himself out." Nancy laughed. "How true that is," she replied. "I will try to be patient, but I shall have my mind on the case every minute until I hear from you." Mr. Soong said it probably would be hours before there would be any police report on the suspicious farmer and the man who had taken away the heavy boxes. When Nancy told this to Ned, he said, "In the meantime, how about having some fun? We'll do a little sightseeing with Bess and George and your father." "I'd love it!" Nancy twinkled. "Is it someplace special?" Ned nodded. "I thought we'd take in the Chinese opera for a while, then go on to eat at a houseboat restaurant out near the little village of Aberdeen. You will be amazed at that place," he added. "I shan't tell you any more about it." Nancy smiled. "You know, the only way you could get me to stop working on one mystery is to intrigue me with another. Now I can't wait to see Aberdeen." Mr. Drew, Bess, and George had not returned, so Nancy and Ned left a note explaining their plan. Then the couple set off by ferry for Hong Kong to attend the Chinese opera. "It goes on for hours and hours," Ned told his companion. "Whole families attend, even with their small babies. It is like an indoor picnic, so far as the audience goes." Later, as they entered the very large, ornate theater, Nancy knew what Ned meant. Small children and adults were moving up and down the aisles. Food vendors seemed to be everywhere, and many people were eating picnic suppers. Infants lay asleep in a mother's or grandmother's arms, while the older people and the teenage group tried to concentrate on the show. In contrast to the plain dress and noisiness of the audience, the production was most dignified and elaborate. Nancy stared in fascination at the exquisitely embroidered silk and satin costumes and the lofty headdresses worn by the players. Each actor moved about the stage slowly and a bit woodenly, but there was grace and charm to the performance. "It seems to me," Nancy whispered to Ned, "that the audience isn't paying too much attention. Why?" Ned explained that the Chinese liked to see the same plays over and over. Many of them practically knew the scores by heart. Even though they don't keep their eyes on the stage every minute, and can even converse or move about, they still know everything that is going on, Ned told her. Half an hour later, he said, "Let's go now." It was growing dark as Ned hailed the taxi to take them to Aberdeen. "It's the oldest village of the fishermen of Hong Kong Island," he explained. "Families live on the junks, and even in the small sampans." When they reached the waterfront of Aberdeen, Nancy stared in wonder. "Why, it's almost a city of boats! Of all sizes!" she cried. "Yes," Ned said, adding that the residents jumped from craft to craft when they wanted to go ashore. "But they spend most of their time on the water," he added. "The junks go out for deep-sea fishing, but the sampans stay around here. The women and children remain on them, while the men are at work. The women are good oarsmen and take their boats everywhere. Out there in the harbor are a floating church and a floating school." "How fascinating!" Nancy exclaimed. "We'll hire one of the sampans," Ned said. "It's the only way to reach the floating restaurant." He pointed off in the distance where they could see a long boat brilliantly lighted. "There are several others, but I think we'll go to the Sea Palace," Ned added. Several women were already calling to the couple, offering to take them. Ned finally signaled a mother and daughter with whom he had ridden before. They smiled as Nancy and Ned stepped down into the sampan and walked into the arched, open-front cabin at the rear. As they left the dock, Nancy was amazed at the strength of the two women propelling their boat. Both were short and very slight, probably weighing not more than 90 pounds. Yet they seemed to have muscles of steel as they stood so straight and rotated their heavy oars through the water. Upon reaching the Sea Palace, Nancy and Ned climbed a stairway to the deck. They walked around to the far side, where a group of people were leaning over the rail and pointing below. "See those boats down there?" Ned asked. Nancy had never seen anything like them. They had compartments of water in which live fish and shellfish were swimming around. "You pick your dinner alive," the young man said, laughing. Fishermen below were recommending the various native fish. Nancy sighed. "I wouldn't know one fish from another," she confessed. "I shall leave the entire dinner to your judgment, Ned." "Good," he said, and guided her inside the restaurant. The head waiter told them there were no small tables left. "Do you mind sitting at a larger one?" he inquired. Ned said they would not, and they were escorted to one near a window. "First we'll have bacon and cucumber soup," Ned told the waiter. "Then some stewed shrimp." He looked up at Nancy to see if she approved. When she nodded, he went on. "A little sweet and sour pork, beef fried in oyster sauce, bamboo shoots, rice, and almond tea." Nancy laughed. "This sounds like a Chinese Thanksgiving dinner. I'm not sure I can eat so much." Ned assured her that the portions would not be large. The couple finished the delectable soup and were busy with the stewed shrimp when Nancy happened to look toward the entrance door. "Ned," she said tensely, "here comes Mrs. Truesdale with a Chinese escort. He's not Mr. Long, though." Ned turned to look. The head waiter led the newcomers to a table some distance up the long room. Mrs. Truesdale did not notice Nancy and her companion. Ned suddenly grinned. "Mrs. Truesdale's shadows are right behind her." Nancy's eyes widened. Bess and George, looking extremely weary, entered the room. As they began to follow Mrs. Truesdale, Nancy quickly got out of her chair and went after the girls. "You!" Bess exclaimed. "Come join us and enjoy yourselves for a while," Nancy invited. "I can see you've really been on the job." "Have we?" George laughed. "That Truesdale woman has 9 lives when it comes to energy. We've been shopping everywhere with her today, and we decided to keep trailing her this evening." The 2 girls dropped exhausted into seats at the table with Nancy and Ned. They had hardly had time to put napkins in their laps when a nice-looking Chinese man hurried up to them. He paused a moment to whisper to George. "I'll take over. Get some rest," he went on, and without waiting to be seated, pulled out a chair at the table next to Mrs. Truesdale. From this vantage point, the others knew he could overhear every word of her conversation. "Who is he?" Ned asked George. "I don't know, but he trailed us all afternoon." Nancy said he must be one of the detectives whom Mr. Soong had retained to follow the girls. "If he isn't, the real sleuth will doubtless be following him, so in any case, I think you girls can relax." "Thank goodness," said Bess. "My feet hurt and I'm absolutely starved." The others laughed. Then Ned repeated the menu he had ordered for himself and Nancy. "Would you girls like the same?" Bess and George agreed to try the exotic dishes. As Nancy and her friends ate the delicious meal, the group exchanged stories. George reported that Mrs. Truesdale had neither said nor done anything the least bit suspicious. Bess declared, "I don't see how she can be connected with the mystery." "Of course, I have nothing to go on, except what happened in Mr. Long's shop," Nancy remarked. Bess and George were completely astounded to hear of Nancy's capture, of her rescue, of her trip to Cam Tin with Ned, and of its results. "You had enough adventure today to do me for a lifetime," Bess complained. "And this mystery is far from solved. Goodness only knows what'll happen next." Bess's worries did not seem to affect her appetite, and she was able to eat every crumb of the food brought to her. George and Nancy declined dessert, but Bess and Ned ate custard pudding dotted with almonds. When they finished, George said to Nancy, Do you think we should stay until Mrs. Truesdale leaves, so we can follow her? No, Nancy replied. I'm sure the police will trail her. We had all better get a good night's sleep. When they reached the hotel, Nancy found a message that she was to telephone Mr. Lee Seung as soon as she came in. Nancy called him at once. Mr. Seung said he had several things to report to the young sleuth. First, the police were not able to locate the man who left the farmhouse with the heavy boxes. We think someone saw you and Mr. Nickerson leaving the place and warned him to disappear. We did raid the farmhouse and found that the owner and his workmen have been beating gold objects of all kinds into small, flat pieces. We believe that these have been smuggled out of the country inside various containers. Mahjong sets! Nancy exclaimed. Possibly, Mr. Seung agreed. Every one of the gold beaters insisted he was innocent of any wrongdoing. They finally admitted they thought something illegal was being done with the gold, but did not know what. Mr. Seung went on to say that a police guard had been placed at the farmhouse to seize any suspicious callers. No one has come there yet, he said, but the police uncovered a great many gold objects, which probably were stolen from shops and homes and brought there to be beaten into small pieces. The Chinese now changed the subject and invited Nancy and her friends to attend a big garden party to be given by a relative of his. The party will be held tomorrow evening. Special fireworks will be displayed, and I'm sure you will enjoy them. You have probably guessed that I am about to ask you to do a little detective work while there. I will be glad to, said Nancy eagerly. Mr. Seung said that at his request, his friend had invited several special guests. They may or may not be involved in the mystery we are all trying to solve. You know two of them, Mrs. Truesdale and Mr. Long. Nancy could hear the ex-police chief give a sigh of hope. Anyhow, it is just possible my twin brother's wish will be realized during the party. But the police require the help of you and your friends. Will Miss George Fane please come looking as much like my niece as possible? I am sure she will be happy to, Nancy responded. That is very fine, Mr. Seung said. I will meet you at the hotel as darkness falls. Nancy would have liked to hear more, but Mr. Seung divulged nothing further. She thanked him for the invitation and accepted it with alacrity. End of chapter 18.